I want to start this story at Ira's bar mitzvah. December of 1909, Ira attained the age of 13, and in accordance with Jewish tradition, he became a bar mitzvah, a son of the commandments, and was now permitted to perform roles and rituals in the Jewish tradition, allowed only to adults. And to mark this transition to being a man, he had a bar mitzvah, a ceremony at which he performed one or more of those roles. Now, we don't know which things he did, but we can be sure that he did at least one, and we can be sure that that one thing he did, if nothing else, he sang the blessings before and after the weekly reading of the Torah, the Holy Bible, the scrolls. It's a Saturday morning, Shabbat morning. The whole congregation is in the synagogue, invited guests, friends, family, and Ira sings the blessing. I'm going to do it for you. I'm going to omit the Hebrew and just focus on the melody. Baraham, 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 and the congregation responds. Baraham, 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 baraham. And Ira continues. Baraham, 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 baraham. What I want you to understand, what you should appreciate, is that in front of all these people, this 13-year-old boy was well prepared. He had studied, he had rehearsed, he practiced. He knew that melody. He had internalized that melodic motif, and so too did his younger brother George. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. That's basically it. It gets varied and changed here and there, but it's basically that key musical phrase. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. Well, shortly after Ira's bar mitzvah, his mother buys him a piano. Now, a piano for an immigrant family was more than an instrument of music. It was an instrument of social aspiration, because it's 1910, after his bar mitzvah. Commercial radio is a couple of decades off. Recorded music is rare. It's still the cylinders. The way you had music was that somebody played the piano. You went to the music store and you bought sheet music, and you placed it on the piano, you sat down on the bench and you played the piano, and people would gather around to listen to you play music and sing along. If you played the piano, you were the center of attention. You had your ticket to society, to social success. And so Ira's mother bought him a piano. Ira didn't want to learn to play the piano. Ira wanted to sit in his room by himself and read books, maybe write something. And then George came home. There's the piano. They hoisted it up through the second-story window, and there it is. And George comes home. He's been out roller skating with the other hooligans on the street. He comes in, takes off the roller skates from around his neck. He sees the piano. He walks over, sits down, plays some of the popular tunes of the day. How did George get to learn to play the piano? Father is astonished. Mother is amazed. Ira is relieved. The piano will be George's. And of course, they grow up to be George and Ira Gershwin, some of the most famous, beloved songwriters of the early 20th century, songs we still love today. And as songwriters, who do you hang out with? Other songwriters, entertainers, people in the business. And there are parties, lots of parties. Somebody's house, somebody's apartment, a club, and always there is a piano. And who's at the piano? George. George at the piano was George at his best. People would gather around, they'd listen to him play. He could play the same song over and over and over again, and each time it would be new. And George would be just as excited to play it again and again as everyone else was delighted to hear it. And as he is glued to the piano bench, mind you, in a room full of piano players, good piano players, it's George who's dominating the keyboard. And where is Ira? Ira, a hard man to get out of an easy chair, is sitting quietly, admiring his brother from a distance, enjoying the way he is a magnet, and how he delights, how George delights in playing this music. And Ira, with that devoted look, you can see him saying, "That's my brother George. He wrote that. Can you believe it? He wrote that. He's at the keyboard, even though all those other piano players want a turn. They know that he's the best. He's the piano player they all aspire to be. He can play their tunes better than they can." Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. Well, it's not enough for George to write Tin Pan Alley hits, Broadway musicals, Hollywood musicals. He wants to write serious music. And he does. He writes the Cuban Overture, Concerto in F, Rhapsody in Blue. But he wants more. He confides in his friend and mentor, Jerome Kern, father of the Broadway musical. He asks him, "Do you think I could write grand opera?" "After all," he says, "all I have is some talent and plenty of chutzpah." Now, you might say that for the young brother to take over his older brother's piano, to the young man in a room full of piano players to hog the keys, you might say that he had chutzpah. And indeed, George said so himself. And he was right in that Americanized sense of the word chutzpah, where it means bold, brash, brazen, unbridled self-confidence. But in Yiddish, the language from which chutzpah is derived, it has a darker meaning. Demonic, diabolical, devilish, as in the case of the boy who coldly murders his parents and then begs the court for mercy because he's an orphan. That, ladies and gentlemen, is chutzpah. Well, one night George couldn't sleep. And so he picked up a book. Normally, book reading was Ira's department. George was not a book reader, but a friend had given him this book, a good friend, and perhaps he felt obligated to read it, a 1925 novel by DuBose Hayward entitled Porgy. He can't sleep anyway, so he picks up this book, and he is so fascinated by the story, he stays up all night and finishes it. He gets in touch with DuBose Hayward. "Would you be interested in collaborating with me on an opera based on your book?" And DuBose is delighted. This is a great prospect. George Gershwin wants to collaborate with me on an opera. But he says, George, I'm currently working on a stage play with my wife. But once we finish the play and it's run its course, well then, yeah, let's do it. 10 years go by. And they finally get together. And it's almost like a correspondence course. George is in New York, DuBose is in South Carolina. They have other obligations. DuBose is writing the words first, and then George is setting them to music. Unlike the way most songwriting teams work, including George and Ira Gershwin. George would write the music first, Ira would then write the words. But here, DuBose is writing the words first. The long distance thing cannot complete the task. They rent a cottage in coastal South Carolina, an island off the coast, to spend some time together and work on the opera. And DuBose is a novelist, he's a poet, he doesn't really get songwriting. He can't make it singable. And so they call in Ira to help out. And George wants to get a feel for the music, the local music, the authentic music of the people in this story. And so he attends a local African-American church. And after the church service on Sundays, they would go outside and sing spirituals accompanied by hands and feet, rhythmic clapping. And George is fascinated. He joins in. And then they have the clapping contest. And George enters the contest. Now, you might think that for a white man, a Jewish white man from New York, to participate in the African American church service in South Carolina, you might say that took chutzpah, but not the authentic. Did you hear me say authentic enough here tonight? Not the authentic chutzpah of Yiddish, that Americanized, kinder and gentler chutzpah. Indeed, Ira had to help out with the lyrics. But if you look at the songs, the lyrics of those 35 songs in Porgy and Bess, you'll see they're all the same. They're clearly the words of DuBose Hayward, except for one song. Some of you are nodding, you know what song I'm talking about. And this song came about differently. You see, George wrote the music first, and then he handed the music over to Ira, and Ira wrote the lyrics. If you look carefully, you'll see that DuBose Hayward is credited. George Gershwin, song by George Gershwin, Ira Gershwin, DuBose Hayward. He needed one more song to his credit so that he could join the American Society of Composers and Publishers. So George and Ira gave him a credit for that song. But understand, these are the words of Ira Gershwin. I'd like to sing the song for you. Look, a guitar. Remember Ira's bar mitzvah? Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. Ba-da-da, ba-da-da, ba-dum. It ain't necessarily so. And the congregation responds, it ain't necessarily so. The things that you're liable to read in the Bible, it ain't necessarily so. Little David was small, but oh my. Little David was small, but oh my. He fought big Goliath, who laid down and dieth. Little David was small, but oh my. Now Jonah, he lived in the whale. Oh, Jonah, he lived in the whale. For he made his home in that fish's abdomen. Oh, Jonah, he lived in the whale. Methuselah lived 900 years. Methuselah lived 900 years. But who calls that living when no gallows given to no man what's 900 years? I'm preaching this sermon to show it ain't necessarily so. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when you take that melodic motif, including the congregational response, and you set those words to it, that, ladies and gentlemen, is chutzpah.
Pretty neat.
So if someone should tell you that George had chutzpah, you can nod your head knowingly, yes, he did. But if someone tells you Ira didn't, you look them square in the face and you tell them it ain't necessarily so.